President Obama is running into some resistance as he asks Congress to pass a $900 billion stimulus bill. The Senate is working on a plan to revive the economy and generate jobs. The House passed a more than $800 billion package last week without a single vote from Republicans, despite pleas from President Obama that the two sides work together. Republican Representative Peter Roskam from Illinois 6th District joins us this morning. Peter, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
What about the congressional plan prevented you from jumping in?
Well, I think big concern on the spending side of it, which is actually why it met with bipartisan opposition. There were about 11 Democrats that looked at the same bill and said, nobody sent us here to spend our way out of this, and there's very little in the bill that is actually stimulative ultimately. And there was a good alternative that was on the table that I think can coalesce and drive towards economic growth.
But Congressman, that's exactly the argument, as you know, that President Obama is making, is that, yes, he was sent there to create change in Washington, and he was sent there to come up with big ideas, and he was sent there to come up with a stimulus bill, and that when he reached out to your side of the aisle, you guys acted as though the Bush years had never come to an end.
No, I think actually I complimented the new president when he came in and spoke to all the House Republicans and complimented him on the tone with which he has approached this problem. And there's near unanimity in Washington that the economy is hurting, families are suffering, businesses are suffering, and the question is, how do you move forward?
So what's wrong with the bill?
Well, what's wrong with the bill is it falls into the same old habit of trying to spend our way out of this. And think of the irony. The irony is we're in this situation today because of money that was spent that didn't really exist, in other words, bad credit policies, and now the federal government is contemplating spending $825 billion in ways that I would suggest are specious. It's not going to have that stimulative effect. There is a better way, and we should pursue that.
Well, what is it?
Well, the better way is to lower the tax rates broadly. There was an alternative plan that was put forward that President Obama's own chairman of his Economic Council of Advisors, her evaluation and her formula looked at this and said, you know what, this alternative plan actually in 2 years will create 6.2 million jobs. Now put that in context, that's twice as much job creation at half the cost.
Well, as you know, the president has been preaching bipartisan support for this, but on Thursday night he kind of took off the gloves a little bit. I want to take a look at a clip.
I believe that it is important for us to set aside some of the gamesmanship in this town and get something done. We are not going to get relief by turning back to the very same policies that for the last 8 years doubled the national debt and threw our economy into a tailspin.
Gamesmanship.
Well, look, I think we saw that last fall with the passage of the Toxic Asset Recovery Program, the TARP program, what happens when people move too quickly on a particular problem. My predecessor, Henry Hyde, described it as something worse than gridlock, and the worst thing than gridlock is the greased chute of government. So getting back to the plan that the House Democrats passed, I think frankly the president allowed himself to get rolled a little bit, unfortunately, and gave control to Chairman Obey, Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and Speaker Pelosi to pass any plan, and I think that we can do much, much better.
Well, Peter, this from the White House saying that the American Recovery and Reinvestment Plan would create or save 157, almost 158,000 jobs in this state. 158,000 jobs.
Think about the cost of
90% of them in the private sector.
Well, let me submit this fact to you. The cost of each one of those jobs in terms of job creation is $225,000 per job across the country. That is an economic house of cards. You don't create a job by spending taxpayer money at the rate of $225,000 per job.
Congressman, we would also conceivably be getting the benefit of that labor. In other words, if it is on construction projects or expanding broadband across the country or reducing the cost of medical care by reducing the paper backload, What's wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with it is there is a better way. There is a way to create twice as many jobs.
What he's saying is we tried that way.
No,
and that way got us into the situation we're in today. We've had 30 years of Reaganomics in the United States, 30 years of preaching that tax cuts were the way to create job growth, 30 years of saying that deregulation was the key to economic prosperity in the United States.
Well, I think,
and you voted against the TARP money, but it was a deregulated financial environment that allowed that collapse to take place.
Well, I would submit that's only partially, that's only part of the story. The other part of the story, in terms of collapse, was pressure from Barney Frank, pressure from Chris Dodd, and others to expand credit markets in places that were not creditworthy, and ultimately created a great deal of pressure that obviously created what I earlier characterized as an economic house of cards. So the way to move forward, the way to get to the point of job creation, in my view, is say, look, there is capital that is stranded on the sidelines that doesn't know what to do. It's not sure about coming in and investing, and the way you create economic growth is you create an environment where capital wants to be put at risk. We saw what happened with this intervention in the fall, where we were told that $700 billion, it was almost messianic. We were told, if you vote in favor of this, the birds are going to chirp and the sun is going to come up. Well, it didn't happen. And now, $700 billion later, this economy is struggling. There is a better way, and I want to help the president reach that goal.
Well, speaking of government regulation, what do you think of the president's proposal that any company taking advantage of this money limit its executive pay to $500,000 a year?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'll tell you, it's slightly populist and maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but if you are asking the federal taxpayers, if you're asking the American taxpayers to literally bail you out, to pull your cheese out of the fire, so to speak, you're in an entirely different category. You have surrendered yourself.
Well, Wall Street is screaming, saying we're going to lose the best and the brightest to other companies.
Well, let me suggest to you that the best and the brightest got us into this situation, and maybe they were overcompensated on their way in.
What do you make of the difficulties the Obama administration is having with certain cabinet nominees?
Well, I think it's disappointing, and I think the president is disappointed with it as well. It's not, you don't want to start the first 2 weeks of your presidency coming out and playing what I call the I'm sorry card.
Yeah, apologizing that quickly.
Yeah,
is never a good thing.
And I think it's part of the expectations that the president created in his campaign, and now they're coming home, and he's being held to a very, very high standard.
There are going to be a lot of opportunities in this state, conceivably, for Republicans in the next couple of years. Perhaps a run for the U.S. Senate, or perhaps a run for governor. Do you have interest in either one?
I'm happy serving the 6th District of Illinois, and we've got a whole host, I think, of really talented folks that are going to be looking at making those statewide races. Look, it's one of those situations you never say never, but I'm a new member of the House Ways and Means Committee, and find that to be an invigorating place and professionally very, very challenging, and it's a place where I think I can do my district the most good.
Congressman, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.